So we're here today to do a panel with the RM on its time. My name is Nicole Bourque-Bouchier. I'm a member of the Mikisew Cree First Nation from Fort Chipewyan, mother of 5, long-term resident of Fort McMurray, and business owner, CEO, and owner of Boucher. Joined with me today is Elder Robert Cree. Thank you for joining us, Elder.
Thank you.
Mayor Sandy Bowman, and Dennis Fraser. And Dennis, what is your official title with the RM?
I am the Director of Indigenous and Rural Relations.
And how long have you been in that role?
Coming on 7 years.
7 years, wow. So you've seen some changes here.
I've seen considerable change.
That was actually where I wanted to start. You know, we're all long-term residents of Fort McMurray, and from a municipality and a rural community point of view, we've all probably seen a lot of changes throughout the years with the relationship between the municipality and the rural communities and its Indigenous people. And I kind of wanted to maybe start with you, Sandy, and get your perspective of the history that you've seen in our region during that time, and what are your initial thoughts around the relationships?
I believe it's like anything can be improved.
No matter where we start from, we can always improve to make it better. I've always had a close relationship with Fort Chipewyan. I started traveling there, I think, in the late 90s to teach the children there. And I spoke to the elders at the time, what they wanted to see. And I think what we're seeing now is the fruition of what the Indigenous communities want to see, is that working together in a common goal, and to kind of recognize the history of our region.
Right. And Dennis, what are your thoughts on the history?
Well, the history is varied, and I guess I have the perspective of being here for a long time. And not that I want to date myself or anything, but when I was a young fella, I came up here in 1975 to work with industry. So I have a background in industry. Suncor, it was GCOS at the time. And so going back to that era, I've observed a lot as a citizen, and then after a period of time left to work in a federal department, and then after would frequently come up here. I got family here. It's like home to me. And so I had family up here and would come back here. And then I thought I was ready for retirement, whatever that is, and that lasted for about 3 weeks. And at the time, quite frankly, the relationship wasn't all that good between the municipality, our rural areas, with our Indigenous leadership communities. So I was asked if I would think of coming back up here, and in this role. And that was coming on 7 years ago. And there's been ebbs and flows, good times, great times, but these times are different. We're in a different era, and sometimes you got to look back to see how far we've come. And you know, I'm really excited to where we're headed now, and where we're at, what we got on the go. So we're in some good times here.
Good.
But it hasn't always been.
Right.
And that relationship is, you know, it's up and down. It's up and down. It's, you know, if we don't do what we're supposed to be doing and working with our communities, it's easy to lose that.
So I'm curious, in 7 years here, were you the first member of the department? Was it already established when you had started?
It was already established, but not to the extent it is now.
Right.
There was a day when we had just one person started in the department, and it kind of grew. And when I came here in 2015, that's when we started an independent department. Back then they were combined with community services. So it started growing from then and continued to grow in a good way. In a good way. Once again, there's been some ups and downs where organizations change priorities, And there was a point in time where the organization saw that it might be beneficial to amalgamate different departments. That was an experiment, and that took a couple years to see that the relationship was lacking. And so 2 years ago, they stood up IRR again as a department. So it's been going strong for 2 years now.
Great, good, well, thank you. Elder Robert, I wanted to ask specifically about the history that you've seen, especially living in Anzac, and the relationship that you've seen over the years between the municipality and your community.
I have a long history of myself living in Fort McMurray. Actually, back in the day, there was only two sections of Fort McMurray. It was Fort McMurray downtown and the area around Keano College, where they used to call Prairie. In between, there used to be one little store in between, but it was all gravel road getting from there to Fort McMurray. And back in the younger days, I used to run, because we used to live in waterways. I used to run from waterways across the trestle, railroad tracks, and end up to where Keano College is today, and from there all the way to Fort McMurray. But back in the day, prior to the start of the development with Fort McMurray, that my parents did move to Lac La Biche. I was like 2 years old, and when I was in grade 3, one day there was 3 gentlemen that come knocking on our door about 5 in the morning. So there was myself and 4 other siblings that were scooped at that time. Unfortunately, I went to school, a residential school, for 6 years, 2 different schools. The first one they took us was in Ermineskin School, and the second one was Blue Quills. Actually, just last weekend, I had the pleasure to go and visit Blue Quills with some friends that went with me. Took me along for a tour, and I said it was okay, so we went there, came back. I used to ride that train. I never did go to school in Fort McMurray, but I used to ride the train to come home in the summer holidays, to come and visit my mom and dad and my older siblings. And then in the fall time, I would run all the way to Fort McMurray, go and see the Indian agent and ask them to give me a ticket to ride back on a train to go back to school down south. And first time I did that, they thought I was joking, But so the lady that was there said, I think, Robert, you should go and talk to your mother about it and see if she's okay with it. I said, I did. That's why I'm here. Can you bring her with you? I said, sure I could. So I ran back. Went and told Mom, and we grabbed a taxi, her and I, back to the Indian agent office here in Fort McMurray, and we talked to them, and they asked her if it's true that it was okay for me to get a ticket to ride on that train, and she says, yeah, that's what he wants. So they gave me a ticket, and I hopped on the train, and away I went. It took us like 8 hours to get to Lac La Biche. Today it takes like 2.5 hours, but back then it was a long trip. And the train would stop on the way along the railroad. But I knew when the train was going to stop, there used to be a little stick on the side of the railroad, and there would be a flag or somebody's shirt hanging on there. That meant that was a signal for the train to stop. So took a long time for the train to stop. And then I see the trapper come out of the bush, throw their bag in the train, and then they'd get on, and the conductor would wave at them, and the train start going again. Took a long time to get going, so finally, we eventually get to Lac La Biche. But those were the summer days, summer travels that I took. And at a very young age, when I was 14 years old, when I came home one day, I seen a sawmill right close to Waterways. It was called Swanson's Lumber. So I ran over there, and because my brothers and my older siblings and uncles of mine were working there, so I thought I might as well go and try it. I went and seen the supervisor there, took me to the manager's, superintendent's office, and told him, this young fellow wants to work. And of course they were talking, and they weren't going to put me to work at first because of WCB. I was too young. If I got hurt or anything, I wouldn't be able to collect WCB. But the foreman said, I think I can find you some work to do. I said, okay. So he said, come back in a couple hours, come and see me. So I ran home. We didn't live too far from there in Waterways. That's where we were living at the time. And I ran back 2 hours, and he said, well, I got a job for you. And I was just jumping up and down and happy to get a job. He said, what you're going to do is you're going to pile all this lumber scattered all over the place. When you finish that, he said, you can go and help those gentlemen load the boxcars. They used to load the boxcars with lumber. And this happened to be two of my uncles that were doing that. So I worked there all summer. In the fall time, I came shopping, got some clothes and bought whatever I needed. And gave Mom some money. And it was the time to grab the train, so I went, got my bag, threw it on a train, and showed my ticket to the conductor and said, go inside, go find a chair. So I went and sat on the train there and waited for the train to leave. And Mom was standing outside there when the train was leaving. She'd wave, and that meant I wasn't going to go. I wasn't going to see her for another season. So, but the reason I did that is because I liked the schooling, Southern Alberta. I like their education system. But the best thing out of it was that I had friends that I can go back to, because I didn't know the students around Fort McMurray. That's why I used to go back and chum around with my friends and whatnot, and it was good. It was okay. It was lonesome at first, but eventually I got over it, and those were the days. But I seen McMurray grew over the years.
You've seen the most changes out of all of us in Fort McMurray, for sure.
Oh yes, oh yeah. I think there was like 3,000 people at the time when I first remember Fort McMurray. And then I finally ended up in St. Francis Xavier High. I went to school in Blue Quills. It went up to grade 8. And then they took me to St. Paul because that's where the high school was. So it was grade 9, 10, 11. And in grade 11, they sent me to Edmonton, and I went and did high school there, St. Francis Xavier High. And then when I finished, I stayed in Edmonton for about 3 years, worked all over the place, finding jobs. I did all kinds of different jobs, wanted to find out what would be my best way to work with as I was growing up. But in 1973, I heard about the Great Canadian Oil Sands, GCOS, the one big oil sand that was exists and they're developing and working on it. And there was a lot of people that were moving north. That's when McMurray started to grow,
Yeah.
you know, because of that oil sands. And I decided to come north. So I came north, and my first job was with Amoco. Amoco was a SAGD plant in our community out in Gregor Lake. So I went to work for them, and I think I worked several years with them. And then elections came in the community, and people were interested in getting me involved. So I took a crack at it. I threw my hat in for a counselor, got in, of course, you know, no problem. And I worked with the chief at that time, who was late Albert Cheecham. And he says, you got some education, don't you? I said, yeah, I went to school. He said, that's good. He said, I need a man of your caliber. He said, you can tell me about these papers, some of these papers that I need to know. So that's when I started learning about the government paper. That's when I started learning about the governments, about industries, about, you know, because Amoco had something going with at that time with our band, with our nation. After 2 years, I ran for chief. I got in 1981, and that's where really my life started. It began, and I helped out not only regionally here, but I helped out provincially and nationally. And used to work with late Dr. Harold Cardinal, very bright, intelligent man, and he showed me a lot of things that I needed to know. And then I sat on different boards. I sat on the board of Indian Association of Alberta. I sat on the board with Indian Healthcare Commission of Alberta. I was a chief of my band. I started Christina River Enterprises, and I sat there as a president. And then I negotiated an agreement with Syncrude at that time with the 5 First Nations and the 5 Métis Local. They came together, 1983. And the agreement was about the employment and training for all Indigenous people. And then I also negotiated the first right of refusal on contracts, you know, because what I was seeing was Indigenous people start a business, small business ventures. They'd go to work get a contract with Syncrude, go to work at Syncrude, but there's these big giants like Klemke and all these big companies.
There's still lots of big giants.
They just swallowed them. I mean, they just, you know, grabbed them and they put them to work, but their business fell apart. So I think that saved a lot of Indigenous companies right from there. That's why today we have very well-to-do Indigenous companies, you know, like in Tuckru and Goloskis, and I think you have a business also.
I might have.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of Indigenous companies came out of that, and then we started NABA not too long after that, so that also helped out with the companies and that. But I did a lot for, like I said, for the region, did a lot for, and then I started, of course, working in the municipality and that, and, you know. So
And
we
they're
got-
very lucky to have you because you have such a rich history and so much knowledge and have seen so many changes from all different angles.
Yes,
I wanted to talk about, you know, what we're here to talk about today, the initiative that the RM has in place called It's Time. And I understand that it's a recognition to the RM's commitment to truth and reconciliation. We're only now, as citizens within the region, beginning to hear about this and learn about it. Dennis, I wanted to ask you, why now? It's time. Why now? And what does it mean?
Because it's time. Yeah, so going back, the TRC report came out in December of 2015. And I think when it first came out, there was a total lack of awareness, understanding when this report came out with the governments, be it federal, provincial, municipal, and even indigenous governments. And what is this? Like, how do we deal with it? And it was just this report. Okay, now we got to pull us apart, and we were no different. In 2016, I was given a copy of this report and say, you want to respond to it? And I'm thinking, well, there's 94 calls to action here. How do I respond to that? You know, just sit down and write a response. And there was something that I knew I wasn't capable of doing. And that is when the shift started on how we needed to do things differently. Now, because myself or my department couldn't just do a response to this, it was much, much broader than that. So we started on a process, a road to reconciliation, which included drawing in all our partners, the First Nations, elders, internally, externally. And, you know, there was a lot of ups and downs, and how do we do this? And it was we were supposed to bring the report back to council about 2018, and we didn't. It still wasn't right. It still wasn't right. And as it progressed, you know, last fall in 2021, we brought a report to council that looked a lot different than it would have 2 years earlier, that would have had no resemblance on what it would have been in 2016. See, that was the path, that was the road where we had to learn. And a lot of times, if you want to learn, if you want to respond to something as critical as a TRC report, you need that Indigenous way of knowing. And that is what we really focused in on. And thus, so about probably a couple years ago, the slogan started, "It's time," with a little round green pin with the feather and the drum and that type of thing. So we use that. I use that for my signature. It's on there. I wear this pin all the time, and it's got the same thing, but it's orange now. We got two of them. Orange being the children,
Right.
our lost children.
Yeah.
And so that's how it kind of started. And along with that, there was the land acknowledgement we started using with our signatures. So there was subtle changes. We didn't want to make too many changes too fast because, you know, it was a learning process. And for the time that I've been here, Mayor Bowman's my third mayor that I've worked with, 3 mayors and councils. I think probably the 4th CAO. And you know, change is constant internally as well as externally. You know, our leadership, chiefs, president, they turn over too. So there was a constant education process, buying in. And to the point where now, it's a slogan that's really caught on. And we've actually got a red one ordered that we'll be using for the missing and murdered and that. So that's kind of the genesis of its time. And we got it on our letterheads, and we use it all the time. I guess if I could use the word branding, it's kind of a branding on, you know, we've talked about reconciliation long enough.
Right.
We've learned about it. And comes a point in time where it's time we have to move forward. I had a conversation here just a few days ago with a local chief, and we're talking about that. And he says, you know, Dennis, it's no longer reconciliation. I said, what do you mean? He says, we're past that. We know that. We know the calls to action. It's time for action. We have to do things. We have to get it done.
Yeah.
So that's where I get a lot of my direction from the leadership, Indigenous leadership, from the elders, listening to Robert's stories. You know, everything revolves around a story, and we're incorporating them. There's a lot of history that we deal with here in Fort McMurray prior to industry, prior to this town being built up. There was a community here. Mogson Flats, the Snai, was vibrant. The people that lived down there. And we can't forget that.
So, Mayor Bowman, if I could ask you, because you come into a new position and the report just comes out. What does its time mean to you amongst everything else that you're having to take care of right now?
It's a huge part. And when I go to its time, I go back to Dennis because kind of made, to me, it's kind of its time. It's on his letterhead, and he's kind of always introduced that to me and told me about it. And I really feel like every day there's something I'm learning every day. Whether it's doing language lessons, I'm not only learning language, I'm learning the stories. So Elder Martin, when she's doing a language lesson, or Elder Mercredi, when they're doing the language lesson, they're telling a story, and I'm learning more than the language. I might get 4 words out of an hour and a half lesson, but I'm learning the history. When I listen to Elder Robert speaking his stories, I'm learning so much each time. So it's a slow progression, but every day we're learning something. And it's even the artwork we have in the council chambers from Elder Frederick. When he was giving his speech the other night, and his poetry, it hit home to everybody in the room. But it was a huge learning experience. And when we talk about it's not reconciliation, now it's time for action, I think each day we're making those progressions to action and learning what it is, what the truth is. Talk about the artwork, what the truth is in it. As we spoke before, everybody that's come to council chambers now and seen the artwork has related it to someone they know. Everybody in the painting, they said, this is my uncle's. That's my aunt. That's who that is in that photo. So I think kind of the long and short of it is, it was a lot to take in coming into the role, but I think slowly speaking with the leaders, speaking with the chiefs, speaking with the presidents, sitting with the elders, listening to the stories and listening to concerns, I think it's we're moving forward, and that's how we have to do it. Is not through letters and back and forth and litigation, but sitting down together over coffee, sitting down, listening to the stories and listening to what the history of our region is. That our history isn't oil sands. Our history here is way before that. So I think it's just a matter of when you say it's time to move on and take those actions.
I appreciate those words, that our history is more than the oil sands, because so many people come up here for the oil sands without having that understanding or knowledge of the richness of the first peoples of this land, right? I know in my experience in working at several different sites, and I always tell this story, when you drive through the gate as an Indigenous contractor, you know going through the gate if their leadership supports Indigenous procurement or not right off the bat, just by the way you're treated. So it starts at the top for sure. So I just want to say, I commend you yourself. You've definitely embraced it, as obviously members of your administration and leadership team have, and it's going to be so important. And it's so important that it's starting with you. What is the RM going to do, or what is its plans to make sure the entire organization is understanding it and embracing it and actioning it, as you say?
And I think that comes back with, like, as myself and my council team is following the calls of action that we can act on, but also in advocating our federal government to do what they've committed to do as well. And all of this goes back to Dennis. When I have a question, he's the person I call. I probably text him more than my wife. Ask him questions. When I go to see a chief or go to see a leader, I want to talk to Dennis and find out what the position is and where we are and what the history is. So I'm not going to walk into a meeting or promise something I can't deliver. I will always talk to our Indigenous Relations, so I know what the history is. And I know what's lacking, what we need to work on.
Right. And
TRC 94 Action to Call is that when I was reading the document, it states, before the last document there, it states, we've given you 94 sections, truth and reconciliation. Here it is. We're not going to tell you how to do it. It's up to you how you develop the working relations and everyone else within each region.
that's right.
So I think the mayor and Dennis are going about this the right way. I think we're going to have a lot of fun times doing it, and I'm glad it's about time. Of course, it took a long time to get to this stage, over 200 years, some odd years, but it's never too late to do anything. So I'm glad this is happening, and I'm really, really happy to help out in any way I can.
Well, that's well said and encouraging to hear from your perspective, especially. What I'm just wondering, and I don't know if you know, Robert or Dennis, what are the specific calls to actions that the ARM is really kind of pointing out and actioning under?
Initially, when we started off internally, we selected 14. We have 15 different departments within the organization, and we got a rep from each one of them. And then so we went through the calls to action and were specific to the ones with the municipality. And we had 14. And then eventually, as we moved forward, we expanded that in a sense that not only the ones that pertain to the municipality, but ones we can influence with the federal government, provincial government. The mayor spoke about lobbying provincial government. There's a lot of overlap there. So we were up to 23 calls to action. And now, after we went to council last fall, we've got 6 additional ones. So we're up to 29 calls to action, and which is the benchmarking we've done. That is the most of any municipality in Alberta and probably even the country.
That is a lot. Can you give us a couple of specific examples?
In regards to calls to action?
Yeah, maybe one of the calls to actions and then one of the actionable items underneath that call.
Well, we've got them into themes, different
Okay.
themes, and fill them in there. And I guess quite simply put, if you look around to the languages over on the wall over there,
Yeah.
we've got the languages for reception, cashier, that type of thing in Cree and Dene. Also the signage up in Fort Chip, the stop signs, they're in Cree and Dene.
So language is one.
Language.
So what are the 3 themes that you mentioned then?
I would have to get our TRC report. I don't have them all memorized, but we have a TRC report, which I have here. But language is huge.
Okay.
And there's a lot of times where we look at the big ticket items, like your strategic planning and your reports and that type of thing. And what I found is that a lot of the stuff that really has the impact is the smaller stuff. Things like the signs, the translation, land acknowledgement.
What about cultural awareness training? Is that something that you're
Yes.
doing within the organization?
Yes, we do. We have 2 e-learning modules that is mandatory for every employee to take.
And
And-
understand public could take them
Yes,
too,
they
I
can.
think, which is
Yes, they
great.
can.
Yeah.
And that was done by a local Indigenous company,
Yeah.
along with her son, that does the graphics.
I have to ask, and this is being a little selfish, but what about Indigenous procurement? Is that something that is on the forefront in terms of one of your actionable items?
Go to our procurement, so I try to, as mayor, try to stay on my own lane.
Yeah.
But as Dennis mentioned, the bigger ticket items, we have our rural water and sewer is one of the huge, we talk about the small things that have big impacts, which is language, and the bigger things, which is providing rural water and sewer and even food sustainability to the rural communities. So it's a wide range. I think, as Dennis alluded to, there's a lot. It's every day. So everything we do, we look through that lens of truth and reconciliation, and who we're here to serve, and what the outcome's going to be for the residents, and which includes all our rural communities. And I think that's the bigger picture, is something that may seem small, like language, goes a long way. So when I go to meet a chief, I'll message Dennis and ask him, is this Cree or Dene? And he'll tell me where I'm going, what I'm doing. So I know the proper greetings, and even meeting with Chief Adams, I took him by surprise one day, greeting him in Dene, and I think that goes a long way, to know that you're taking the time to learn the language. And this being the decade of Indigenous languages, which again falls under the Truth and Reconciliation, I think by us as mayor and council learning the language ourselves shows the community that's something they can be doing as well. I really enjoy those classes, and it's like I said, one small little thing can have waves through the community.
Right. Especially coming from yourself and your leadership team, for sure. I'm getting a real sense of a complete change in mindset within
Yeah.
the organization, and that's definitely where it begins.
And when I hear people like Elder Cree saying they appreciate what we're doing and they think we're doing a great job, so I hear that from different elders that I've met with and have been teaching me. When they say that and they see a change and they see a change for the good and that they're happy what we're doing, then I know we're doing something right. I'm not looking for a pat in the back from our federal government, but when the elders say we're doing something right, then I know we're doing something right.
And he's saying you are.
Exactly.
Robert, what are some of the barriers that you see, though, in the municipality with having the history it does within the region? What are some of the barriers that you think are going to be faced in working within the rural communities?
Aside from politics, I don't see any barriers that will come around as long as there's good communication happening between the two parties,
So
between
key.
the, yeah, between the municipality and the leadership in the rural areas, you know, and I think this will probably. We have to remember we're just starting this. This is all new, something new. One thing I wanted to mention, a person asked me the other day, a non-Indigenous person asked me the other day, he said, what sort of things you're going to be teaching? I said, well, let me tell you something that's very important. I said, when it comes as elders, knowledge keepers and whatnot, and our culture, traditional culture, I said, you know, we're born, that's why we're very highly spirited. I said, spiritual people. I said, we're born with a spirit. We live with that spirit all our lives, which is a very short life. You know, you get in between that time, you get a chance to either go to work or work for your family, start a business, or whatever you want to do. But when we leave this world, I said, we're going to leave. Our spirit is going to leave, but our bodies remain on Mother Earth. And when that spirit leaves, I said, and I questioned him, I said, do you think we're going to have color? He said, never thought of that. I said, we won't. Our spirits don't have color. I said, when we get to spiritual world, when we get to heaven, wherever you call it,
Right.
there's no color over there. We'll all be equal. I think we've been tested by the Creator to be able to work with one another. I said, we've been bombarded time after time after time, but hey, we're still here, and we're ready to start. Even if it took this long, we're ready to start to help, you know. Let's all get that business going and be all equal and move on from there.
Well said. Such wise words.
We live in a
Robert.
beautiful world.
Yes. So success then, we are starting, and Dennis, 29 calls to action within your department to have to put actionable items to. What does success look like to you, say 10 years from now?
10 years from now, if I was still here, I guess it's about partnerships, you know, because everything is based on partnerships. And we either have them or we don't. And, you know, if we continue down the path of our relationships internally and externally, we'll be well positioned. And, you know, to move some tough items forward. And I guess one of the things that I reflect on is on March the 30th, 31st, April 1st, somewhere around there, we went up to Fort Chipewyan and met with the elders. And, you know, there's a couple functions on that day, but, you know, sometimes you can't read things, you can't tell people, you got to feel them. You got to feel them. And that's the Indigenous way. And, you know, I was impacted by going to Fort Chip for the 3 days and to see the elders there, like the place was packed. And a lot of the elders were in residential schools. And we were right on the site. of Holy Angels Residential School, where some of them have gone, some of the leadership have gone, you know, and then when they can ask the municipality, IRR, to be a part of that, that's huge, that's important as we go forward. Now, we've got another session coming up with the elders up there. There's going to be 3 of them. And then there's a truth scanning, soon as the weather warms up somewhat, and you know, with the radar, ground penetrating radar. And we're going to be a partner at this because we were asked to be. And you know, when the Indigenous communities, leadership, elders ask you to be there and even speak at their function, I remember I spoke there in front of all the elders, and I felt so inadequate on their lived experiences. You know, and it's building on that. So in 10 years from now, the people that are in leadership, people that are there, that become elders, they remember that. They grow from that. And how we asked for help from a government, in this case the municipality, and they were there.
And Mayor Bowman, maybe the same question. In your time, what is success going to look like for you with its time?
Yeah, for me, looking back, I just what Dennis was talking about. We were in Fort Chipewyan. I was there with Elder Rita Martin for that same weekend for her language, our decade on Indigenous language. So I was there with her, but they were also doing the truth scanning meeting, and I went over there as well. And when I walked in, it's the exact same thing. I was there to deliver a book to one of the elders, but she grabbed me right away and wanted me to speak. And right away, I felt like Dennis said, I don't belong. I shouldn't be speaking in this group. I'm not adequate. I don't have these shared experiences. But she wanted me, and her exact words were 2 words, and that's it, and put me on stage. But it's to be invited and wanted to be part of it. And I've seen some familiar faces, and it was a great experience. But and again, when I talk about where we're going, where I want to see us going, I'll go back to a speech Elder Frederick McDonald gave last week. He said it's going back to the very first agreements that were made, the 2-road wampum belt, that you're working together in the same direction, not one leading the other, not one in front of the other, not one following, but going the same direction together. And I think this is what we're doing here now, and working with the elders, working with the leaders of the communities together. We're not one group telling the other group what to do. We're sitting down, talking together, sharing experiences, and working in the same direction. So what I'd like to see in 10 years, and as he said, hopefully I'm still here, but is that communication that it's not something we're looking for, it's not something we would like to see, that it's an action that we're always just working together.
Right. Yeah. I do agree. Being invited in by the Indigenous community at any level is very special, and always a really, really good sign, right?
I think also what we need is, I like to see maybe a couple of chairs inside that chamber with Indigenous people, you know, to keep the momentum going. But also, you asked about how we're going to move this forward. I think things like MOUs are doable, you know, memorandum of understanding, things that we both could recognize, both use and read, you know. I know we talk a lot about Indigenous way of life when we come to something like this, but we try to work it into collaboration, into writing, you know, write all the, let's say, what did you, how many did you say, 23?
29.
29. You know, work on those things and sit down and work and make sure we capture everything, what's going to happen from there.
That's a really good point, because it's one thing to say 29, but it's another to work collaboratively together within the region to really talk about what those actions look like under the 29.
Yeah.
I do want to, again, thank you for including me today. And I really want to congratulate the municipality on its time, because I agree it's time.
Yeah.
And I really get the sense of importance that you're putting on this. So congratulations on that, and really look forward to continuing to hear a lot more about it as time goes on. Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Nas como no man, repele como está.